Hey guys, it's Simon here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're doing another episode of the Sword and Sorcery Book Club. Today we're looking at the third episode of The Road to Scourge of the Serpent, and today we're looking at The God of the Bull, which is one of the stories that we see here in The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, which is book 1 in the Del Rey collection of Conan. There's 3 of these. It's on page 40, I think. Let's see, let me double check here. It's early on, actually. And these are supposed to be organized chronologically based on when he wrote the stories. So it has The Phoenix on the Sword as the first story, then Frost Giant's Daughter, God and the Bull is the third story, and that is from page 39 to 59, where it's followed by the Tower of the Elephant. So third story, it was, I think, initially said to be written in 1932 based on some research that people did. But it's a story that was not published in his lifetime. It was published posthumously in 1952 in the Space Science Fiction magazine for their September issue, which is interesting. I'm not sure why it ended up on a space science sci-fi magazine, since it is, not. But I guess that it was just a general pulp thing that had started as a sci-fi magazine and then moved on to just general pulp, right? I guess that's what it was. Otherwise, I guess you could argue that Robert E. Howard did dabble in sci-fi to an extent, particularly if you're looking at something like Almeric, right? But not quite. Also, the Eldritch horror kind of elements are technically sci-fi, since it's about like alien god beings, right? And of course, The God and the Bull is a Conan story. It's not really my favorite. I don't think it's a bad story, but I don't quite enjoy it that much. I mean, it's an easy read and it's, enjoyable while you're reading it. But in the broader world of Conan stories, it's not that exciting. And partially the reason why it's not so exciting is because Conan is a part of it, but he's almost kind of like an afterthought. He's in it, and he is technically the character that has the action sequence that comes with the story. But the story is not about Conan. It's a cop procedural set in a fantastical version of a medieval-esque city, right? I can't remember what city they're in, but they're in this place, the Publico, I think, or it belongs to Callian Publico, who, kind of organizes or maintains this temple museum thing. And something happens there. A murder happens on the premises. Conan stumbles across the murder. He is blamed by the people that see him there. He is kept there for a while, and then people show up to kind of investigate, right? And then the vast majority of the story is actually about that investigation. Conan is questioned by the investigator, but he's not really the main character. It almost feels more like the main character, to an extent, is the detective character. I think he's technically an inquisitor, and his name is Demetrio. So he's kind of like going through it, slowly thinking about all the things. He's like, okay, this man has been garroted to death, right? There was something wrapped around his neck and he was choked to death. And you can see that it was because he has bruising around his neck, and his body's kind of like in a whole piece. It's not slashed or anything. And he spent some time, thinking about it. And he's like, well, the Cimmerian would have probably just murdered him with a sword, since he has one. It doesn't make too much sense for him to not do that. And then the guard, Aris, found him after he found the body, when he revealed himself to be there, right? And then they go through a few more things. There's this other character whose name is Postumo, or Dinas, right? Who is a very bloodthirsty cop. And he basically just tortures people until they say what he wants them to say. And there's a lot of byplay there. You have that like good cop, bad cop thing against Conan, where Conan and Dinas are constantly at each other's throats. Conan is like, I'm not a dog like the rest of you. If you yell at me to do something, I'm not going to do it just because you tell me to. And Dinas is like, just let me at him, let me beat him up, I will get a confession out of him, right? And this is kind of interesting because It maybe correlates a little bit with some of the interesting conversations that Robert E. Howard had with Lovecraft about the police and police brutality, which we talked about at Howard Days this year. But I'm not too sure. I wonder if this was before or after those letters where they talk about the police. And then Demetrio ultimately decides, yeah, Conan didn't do it. Let's go look and see what else we can find here. So Conan kind of joins them, and it's kind of funny because in a different context, you might see the characters turn back to look at Conan and be like, why are you with us, right? Like, what's going on? And Conan being like, if I don't help you solve it, you're not going to, and then I'll be blamed, right? That kind of vibe happens there, and Conan kind of has that thought process there. And so he goes along with them, and they look through the situation. Then they hear a chariot or a wagon move away, and Aris, who's very detail-oriented, can hear, oh, based on the time that the chariot spent on the road, it probably stopped at this guy's house, right? Promero's house. And so they go and find Promero. They go and find the charioteer, whose name is Aros or Erato or something like that. And so they bring them up, and now we have two more potential perpetrators, right? And so they question them. Erato is a slave, and he hates his master, who was the Publico guy, but he didn't kill him. Danis beats him up for the confession, and he doesn't give it to him. And then Promero kind of tells him, okay, our boss was skulking around doing things he probably shouldn't have, because what we're holding here is a special sarcophagus. It's a giant bowl. It's been closed, but apparently it's very valuable, right? And it's very ancient. And so there's something supposed to be in there that will make Calico or Calidoto or whatever his name was very, very rich, right? But the thing is that he had already promised this thing to Calanthes, the priest of Ibis, who is enemies with Thotamon and the Stygians, right? And so because he was going to give it to him, and he only had it for a few more days, he created this like very skulking kind of scheme to try to open the casket or the sarcophagus, get the thing inside it, close it again, and then I presumably send it back to Calanthes, right? But when he did, it seems like something came out of it, right? They find the sarcophagus, Demetrio and Conan and Dinas and all these other characters, and the casket or the sarcophagus is empty, but it's clear that there was something in it and that it's a very, very old vessel, right? They checked the exterior. Something definitely opened this with a chisel by force. The top of it has a decoration on the top, or like the handle, which is a serpent crown that marks it as something belonging to Set, the serpent god, right? And at the bottom, they find Thotamon's mark. So this is something that belonged to Thotamon, to the Stygians, and that is marked by their god. And so this is dangerous, right? And so Promero starts kind of going crazy, realizing that he's probably going to die soon, right? And then all the other characters kind of blow him off. They're like, whatever, it doesn't matter, let's keep looking. They find the cord that was used to kill the character that we find dead at the beginning, who is Calico Publico. And it's a weird thing. It's dark and black, I think, but it's also splotched. And it's a weird material. And I wonder if this is supposed to be like snakeskin, like a molted snakeskin, and they just don't know that that's how snakes molt, and so it looks weird to them. But I can't see why it would be black and splotched unless it's some sort of organ or something else that they just can't fathom as being, you know, something that came out of a body, right? But it's kind of unclear what it is, but it is this like ugly, like oily thing, right? And it's very thick, right? And so they move on, they find it, okay, they're like, yep, for sure Conan didn't do this, but who did? They go into a room, Promero goes first, and then he comes back running and yelling about the god having a long neck, and then he falls over and he's dead. The other characters rush into that same room alongside Conan to see what's going on, and all of them, except for Conan, run away in horror at what they saw. And we don't know what they saw at the moment, but then Conan walks in more calmly afterwards again, and he looks through the room, and behind a kind of like silk or kind of weird diffusing material, he sees something, and it is a beautiful woman, and he only sees her face, and imagines that the rest of her body is as beautiful and perfect and humanly inhuman as her face, because she is someone that looks beautiful within the context of our understanding of humanity, but she lacks any emotion, any thought, any thing, right? She's just a mask that looks like a gorgeous woman. And she hypnotizes him, and she sways like a cobra, right? And she ultimately says something to him in a language he doesn't understand, but knows means to come to her, right? And that breaks the spell. And instead of going to her, he slashes with his sword. He cuts her head off. Her head falls. And then Conan sees that her body was that of a snake. She was a woman-headed snake, which is crazy. And then he runs away in horror as well to follow all the other characters who presumably died because they were all hurt after Conan and them have a battle that ends kind of quickly thanks to Promero showing up and dying, right? And it's not a bad story, and by the end you do enjoy it, but a lot of the procedural aspects in the middle just felt very boring to me. It felt like a lot of talking and not a lot of stuff happening. And the thing is that it's not bad per se, but when it comes to that sort of storytelling, I prefer to watch it than read it. And so this story doesn't quite work for me for the vast majority of the time. There are some things that are interesting about it. There is kind of a funny element that I don't necessarily know if Robert E. Howard meant to be funny, with that idea that Conan's like, well, I got to help you solve this problem because otherwise you're going to blame me and I don't want to deal with that crap, right? And there's also interesting elements and world building that is developed here. Calanthes, the priest of Ibis, and Set and Tadamon. And you can imagine that the Ibis god is something like Horus, where Set is, the evil Egyptian god. Ibis, I guess, would technically be Ra, but Horus or Osiris are the ones that actually battle him in the myths, right? So, you can imagine that it's a bird-headed god, right? At least you can say that. I don't necessarily know. I guess Thought, the god of knowledge, is supposed to have the head of an ibis, right? But I don't know if that's like a warrior god type character or archetype. And I don't necessarily know that Robert E. Howard would have thought of it that way, right? But the idea of like a hawk or an eagle fighting a snake makes a lot more sense to me, right? Especially because I'm Mexican and our crest for the nation is an eagle eating a snake, right? So I don't know, but an interesting element to the world building there developed, but otherwise a fairly enjoyable story. The most important part here is the Gorgon, Naga, Medusa-esque creature that comes out of it, a female creature that comes out of this bowl, right? Or this giant sarcophagus. We did see a scene in one of the promotional materials that have been shown off for the Scourge of the Serpent that we are going back to that story more directly, and we did see the beginning of it where Conan is talking to a nobleman and then is sent to climb up into a building, right? And I think we saw that in Ivan Gil's work on the Free Comic Book Day issue, right? So I don't know if what's going to happen here is that the god in the bowl, the Medusa creature, is not going to be dead from Conan cutting her head off, but rather is going to mold or something and regrow, regenerate, and then she's going to become an enemy, or if it's just the idea of this serpent-headed woman who Conan has some knowledge of and who will maybe come back in a different way. Maybe a different character that looks like her is going to come back and attack Conan in revenge for one of her sisters or something, right? I'm not really sure how it works. I'm not super, well-versed in how Jim is writing this, so it's going to be pretty interesting to see. I'm looking forward to it. There is one thing about the story at the end that was interesting, and it's that Conan runs away in horror. He sees, and he has a desperate need to flee, and he does. This is a young Conan, so this makes sense. He is a thief at this time, so maybe he just hasn't developed his spine to the same level, right? Because he doesn't have issues fighting men, and he doesn't have issues fighting wizards. But I don't know if he's really interacted with too many Eldritch things at this point, right? And mostly whenever Conan does interact with Eldritch beings, for my remembrance, he does feel fear about them and then decides to overcome it. But in this case, he doesn't really have to overcome it because he's already killed it, right? And so he can feel his fear and run away very easily. But I wonder how other people feel about this, because this doesn't really line up with the idea that we have of Conan in like the cultural zeitgeist, right? I imagine Conan as someone that doesn't run, doesn't retreat, doesn't avoid conflict unless it's absolutely necessary. And he's someone that is definitely able to feel fear, but he doesn't let himself freeze at it, right? And he rarely runs. At least I don't remember doing so. But at the same time, Conan is an intelligent character. He's pretty pragmatic, so he would run away if he needs to. I just don't remember any stories directly where he decides to run away, right? So interesting concept there, the fact that Conan, at least in his younger years, did feel the need to run away from conflicts, right? So pretty cool. Not much else to say here. What do you guys think about the story? Have you read it before? Have you not read it before? If you have read it before and you know a good adaptation of this in the comic books, please let me know down in the comments so I can go ahead and give it a read sometime later, in the future. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.